George Floyd, Minneapolis man. I think he was maybe 40. And I'm just shaking my head. Uh, I have so many thoughts. First of all, the data. The data is that, believe it or not, and you can look this up, more unarmed white people are killed total in any given year than unarmed black people. The problem is white people are about 62% of our population, and black people are 13%. So, what does this mean? It means that a black man is much more likely to be shot by police than a white man because of the proportion of population. What else would provide context for this situation and this issue, which has been ongoing now for many, many years? The other part of it is that, well, let's look at the whole justice system. Let's look at police in general. The fact is, police mistreat Black Americans at a higher rate than white Americans as well. They get beaten, they get treated very badly when no one is looking. More Black people are unable to extricate themselves from the justice system, even when they had a real chance of having their rights advocated for and or being treated equally. They can't, and the impediment is money. Now, do I think that all Black people are poor? No. That's the thing too, is the media really perpetuates a narrative that all of our Black Americans are vulnerable in such a way that they're being mistreated as in a communist country or a totalitarian regime, when that's not the case. The environment, the milieu that poor Black Americans live in and exist in is really awful. And then we must ask why that is. So the justice system is unfair. The policing is unfair, as well as the police are not respected. There are two sides to this. Um, and I think it comes from people judging the other group in a monolithic way. And so, Tamir Rice, who was, I think, 12 or something, he was playing with a toy gun in Ohio. He was shot and killed. And then you have officers being ambushed here in California by either someone with a vendetta or something like that. You have the DC sniper, which was many years ago. He was Black. Does that mean now that we're being hunted by ex-military Black people? No, of course not. So I think we really need to keep our heads when a single incident happens. I think that American media, and maybe all media, are very, very soft on data, very lacking in data, and we really need more data, but we need very accurate interpretation of data. Most people don't know that there are more white people, white unarmed people killed by police. And they should. They should know it. The Washington Post had an article a few years back about it. But of course, the whole tone was talking about, I think Mike Huckabee said more white people are shot by police. And the tone was, well, he's not wrong. Like, sorry for sharing facts. There's no place for that. This is why I really welcome the attitudes of some conservative Americans because it's not, I used to think, oh, they're colorblind because they don't like to talk about race. They're uncomfortable. It's their Jungian shadow side, and I'm all trying to analyze them when really there's some real merit in being colorblind, meaning, you still have to do the work of dealing with your own propensities toward prejudice. But once you've done that and at least really made the effort to awareness, then you can be colorblind because that is the best way out of this. If we go on impressions from one event and then that impression stays until the next event, we are not going to be out picturing the purpose of our country, the purpose of our Constitution, the purpose of our Declaration of Independence. And it would be a real shame for that. I tend to get rambly with these things, but this is one of my pet topics. Every time we had one of those high profile shootings in 2015 and 2016, I would always be posting about it. And the image we saw of that skinny, white, bald officer with his knee on George's neck, and George's face is literally in the asphalt, is it's shocking, but it's I not so much to me because I know police can get carried away. Of course, you always have to look at what happened before. Resisting arrest usually is something that ends up very badly, resisting arrest. And, there's that window of time before they decide they're going to take you in. And in my experience, which I have had experience with this, you want to mind your P's and Q's in that window of time. How do I know that? Definitely don't want to be taken to jail. And I figure if I start arguing and fighting about it, they could just get meaner. I had an experience, I've told people this before, but I might as well share it. I used to live in Victorville, California, and that is in the high desert, about an hour and a half north of here on the way to Las Vegas. It's a beautiful place. I was a newspaper reporter there, and I really loved it. There's actually a lot more people than you might think. There's about a million people in the Victor Valley. Victorville has, in more recent years, been associated with meth production before it all went to Mexico, or a lot of it, and criminals and people who maybe went through the LA County jail system and then couldn't really afford to live anywhere here in LA, and so went to Victorville. There's a high proportion of parolees and those on probation. The reason I'm telling you all that is that I moved back to LA about 10 years ago, and I was on my way to a rave with my then boyfriend who was visiting from San Francisco. We were going to a rave in um, some kind of warehouse district. Everything seemed to be going fine, except as we were parked, we were getting ready to get out of the car. Up came a patrol car with the sirens going, and the officer came up, got my license. I was driving. As soon as he saw Victorville, it seemed like that really affected his treatment of me. What I've noticed is that white women don't get the same special treatment that many law enforcement officers do show toward especially young white men. I think it must be just because they identify with them, or they just over periods of time in contact with them, they have perhaps decided that their threat level can be lowered, their fight or flight. That something might go wrong. But they also don't like it when white women or any women cry, which I did know. Anyway, I got out and he asked me to get out of the car. Long story short, they were looking for ecstasy, and I kept saying I don't have any. They got more and more angry. They handcuffed me and sat me down on the curb. Meanwhile, my boyfriend, who had a giant knife in his trench coat and a flask of liquor and a weed pipe that was still warm, they found all that and they were talking to him like he was a buddy. They said, "We're going to take your girlfriend to jail." They kept me there for a long time and they were threatening me. And I knew that I had the truth on my side. So I just stayed cool. Started going through the trunk. I probably should have told them they couldn't search the car, but I had nothing to hide. They started going through the trunk, and I guess my purse was in the back because I wasn't going to be taking it into the rave. And the rookie found my birth control pills and opened them up and was really excited that he had found something, some illicit drugs. And his partner, who had obviously more experience, started laughing. And I was like, dude, that's birth control. And then he was all disappointed and they had to let me go. But I never forgot how I got roughed up by the LAPD. I don't understand why there are some officers who seem to get through their entire career and see so much, and then it's their day to fall, right? It's their day to screw up. I guess they probably screwed up a lot more. I know that internal affairs doesn't always punish people the way they should be, and a lot feel that they're a law unto themselves. And we've all heard that people go into law enforcement. Some people, a certain percentage, go into law enforcement and the military because you know On the mild side, they like the control, and on the harsh, real harsh side, they want to kill people, and they're sociopaths. But we also don't want to stereotype anyone. I hesitate to even say this, but don't you guys think that I've never seen such a public display of um, feedback for a Democratic candidate before from Black Americans as I did when Joe Biden said in an interview, I guess Thursday morning on the Breakfast Club with this radio personality, Charlemagne the God. And Joe Biden, everybody knows now, said, and trying to, if you're trying to figure out whether you're for Trump or me, you ain't black. Right away, Charlemagne didn't even take a breath. He said, it's not about Trump. It's about, I want to know what you are willing to do for my vote. And Charlemagne has interviewed Kanye West, and so he's very familiar with the kind of awakening that's going on. It's just that, like it's smart to do, he's skeptical of anyone who wants his vote, and as it should be. Stevie Wonder had a song called "You Ain't Done Nothing." It was about how politicians come to their neighborhoods every year around election time and they forget about them the rest of the time. So it's been known for a long time how those things work. So the You Ain't Black thing made a huge impact, although it was very telling that a lot of the left wing social media personalities and pundits and media were trying to downplay it. We're trying to say that whoever was complaining about it was just a troll or a bot, maybe a black Russian bot, which is really sad and pathetic. And it seemed like, a momentum that's been building for 2 or 3 years of Black American support for the president was kind of culminating. It was coming to perhaps the most prominence that it ever had. We also had the horrible killing of Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia. I'm very familiar with Well, I'm not very familiar with Brunswick. Let me backtrack. I've been to St. Simon's Island, and Brunswick is the city that is on the way, on the shore to St. Simon's Island. I mean, I don't know anything exactly about what happened. I've seen a few posts suggesting that there was more to the situation, that there had been a lot of robberies in the area. But be that as it may, it appears to me that the profiling that this man and his son did was extremely detrimental and does remind me of Trayvon Martin. And again, if we are going to look at that image and then say, this is how white America acts, and this is who Black America is, I mean, on the face of it, you can see that that's not scientific, that that's not going to help us. Think of all of the Black Americans that you know who would never be in a position like that, who, you know, run their business, their law enforcement, public safety, um, large and in charge, and, not the stereotype that we see in the media, you know? And think about how that narrative is really non-existent for those who, of course, most successful African Americans are somehow giving back to their community, like Nipsey Hussle. He lived, he continued to live in South Central and had a business there before he was shot by in a gang-related murder about a year ago, more than a year ago. And so, but they're not victims, and they're working with America in general. They're not seeing themselves with a siege mentality. But this right here, it's almost textbook. It's that's what I'm saying. The timing is so weird. Of course, there's no way to plan the timing, but the timing is unbelievable. Also, there has been um, a cliche, a statement regarding young Black men who get killed, saying, obviously their lives matter just as much as anyone else's. And then there's also a quote from Eric Garner, who was selling cigarettes. He was selling Lucy's. Was it Coney Island? Somewhere in New York. And he was saying the exact same thing that this George Floyd was saying. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. That was 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. And I remember just being devastated about it then. And I'm thinking, how could someone who is living on this earth, watches the news, hears about stuff, not realize, hey, the next time somebody is like saying, I can't breathe, let's see, I might get one of my fellow officers to help me restrain him so that we are not in danger. And yet at the same time, I can take my knee off his neck. No. I mean, he was just sitting there in the video. And the bystanders, they were actually begging the police, begging that police officer to remove his knee from Floyd's neck. And then another saying that we have with this whole issue is say my name. Say my name. Because in Ferguson, Michael Brown, I think there was something with where, like, he was treated kind of just as a statistic. And his body lay in the street for a very long time. And I don't know the exact issues with Ferguson, but there was a lot that we didn't know when that first happened. Say my name. I can't breathe. And then there was an episode of the really popular television show on Netflix, Orange is the New Black, which I don't know how many of you watched that, but it was in like the second or third season. A very beloved character who was kind of slight of build, got caught in, there was a very intense, uncertain situation in the cafeteria, and it was a women's prison, federal women's prison, and it was based on the writings of someone who had gone through it, but they take a lot of liberties. But anyway, they wrote an episode where a woman was accidentally killed by an officer, and it was accidental in this case where he didn't even realize that he was sitting on her because there was so much chaos going around. But even so, the way that they dealt with it was really, really just not with any respect. This was a fictional show, okay? But they used the words say my name and they used the words I can't breathe. And so the fact that this is happening, it's almost like, are we in a movie? Are we watching a movie right now? And then this is the crazy part. Have you guys heard this? They have looked at the picture of the cop that had his knee on George Floyd. Somehow they dug out an event with President Trump and it looks like the same guy. It's hard to tell with a picture when the guy's image is small, but it really does look like the same guy, and he was with the Minnesota Police Union. How perfect is that for those who want President Trump to fail? How perfect is that? It's textbook perfect. It's Hollywood perfect. I mean, I can't think of a better scenario to get people's minds off the Biden comment. It was hard for me to find some of the police shootings that I've read about over the years, but there was one that was recent. I'd say it was 2018, and it involved a family at Costco. Now, this is an interesting one. Didn't get a lot of attention. It was somewhere in California. There was an elderly couple. The man was white. The father was white. I think the wife was Asian or Filipino and they had a son who was 35 or maybe 32, and he had mental issues. He was autistic. He had autism. And they were in Costco, and the son was trying to get some samples, and he was standing next to an off duty police officer who was Hispanic. The son jostled him or pushed him. The Hispanic man drew his gun, and the parents were begging him, don't shoot, don't shoot. He's ill. He's ill. I don't know why they didn't just say he's mentally ill, but apparently the direct quote was he's sick. He's sick, and also shot the parents, but they lived. Are we going to then say, oh, we're frozen in time and there's a war on the mentally ill? There's a war on the mentally ill, and we got to protest. And by the way, our president doesn't really care about the mentally ill, so we got to get rid of him. I mean, it's like, We are smarter than this. We're smarter than this. Tragic situations need to be changed. Now, I felt a silver lining come through today, and I'll tell you what it is. When we've had some of these issues in the past with police shootings, and we've talked about, I know for a long time I was saying, we need better training. Why can't they just tase him? By the way, some people have been killed by tasing too, because it's pretty dangerous. Seems like training, better, again, better knowledge of race relations. But I'll tell you something. I think the biggest thing that could make a difference in all of this is prosperity. What was George Floyd doing? They thought maybe he had written, they said fraud, but I think it might be check fraud or something. They thought he had paid for something with a bad check. I don't know what else it might have been. And clearly, he was in a cycle of perhaps addiction, trying to hustle and get by. And there's been nobody to really care. Nobody? I mean, there are a lot of churches in these areas. There are a lot of like sidewalk churches and pastors and, trying to get people on their feet. But the rest of America is kind of oblivious. I was really gratified to see there was a Trump supporting Facebook page. It's Lexit. Lexit is Latinos exiting the Democratic Party. And they're very strongly for Trump, and they're very strongly for personal responsibility and prosperity and not being a victim. But they were so mad and immediately called out this situation correctly, like any good American would. And that is the silver lining. Every conservative that I have interacted with online has been extremely distraught about this situation, which is not what most on the left would ever expect. They would expect some backpedaling, some excuses. I've heard before a lot of, well, Black Americans need to learn how to respect the police. I think that there is an element of that. I think that there's an element of, how do you get yourself out of this situation? Because my theory has always been when a Black person gets into the clutches of the law, okay? And there's that window before they decide to take you in. I think in the past, if you got taken in, things were not going to go well for you. You might not even ever get out. You might get killed. You might be in for a few years. You have a family. So I think there is something, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously I am not speaking from personal experience, but my theory is that since they knew that things were going to go so badly if they even got caught in the clutches of law enforcement in some areas, that they were taught to demand to know why they were being taken in. And if you watch some of these videos over the years, you can see that they're always saying, what did I do? What did I do? What is the charge? Sadly, they don't usually get an answer, and the situation escalates and becomes worse. So no, a couple years ago, do you remember the dual Australian and American citizen who lived in Minneapolis? And she was a holistic doctor, and she was killed accidentally by a police officer who happened to be of, I believe, Ethiopian descent. He actually got 12 years in prison. The trial was completed not too long ago, and he was extremely remorseful. His excuse was that he thought he heard something and thought it was an ambush. But the reason I bring it up is number one, to say that this black white thing is a construct. It's false. Okay. Not to say that African Americans haven't had a heck of a time that people have not realized. They have, okay? But we need to look at every situation on its own merit and realize that the rest of the world does not say, are you black? Are you white? It's, are you brown? Where are you from? And this poor woman, she was engaged to be married. It was a pretty high sentence for the shooting of an unarmed person. Now we know some of these people have gotten off with it with no jail time, like the Eric Garner situation, the man who couldn't breathe when he was selling cigarettes. But if there is a double standard, it could be the lack of proper representation, legal representation for the victim's family. Every situation is different. It really, really is. And I don't know, either fortunately or unfortunately, we all need to become experts in these types of matters because they matter to us. We need to be aware. We need to want to help and look for solutions. But I say that since conservatives are just as outraged as liberals with this recent incident, that it's a real opportunity for reform. It's a real opportunity to get the bad apples out of each um, police department. You know, you can still be for law and order, and you can still be for safe streets without making a dog whistle about race, number one. And you can still be for all of that while being for people not getting killed by police. Well, I think there is a pattern. Like, if you're not black, it's a lot of times it'll be like mentally ill will get killed. If you're not black, there was an elderly librarian who was participating in a safety drill. I kid you not, somewhere else in California or maybe Arizona. The gun wasn't supposed to be loaded. I mean, come on, come on. Bad things are gonna happen. Bad things all do happen all the time, but we need to do our best to make things better. And they actually, statistically, things are getting better. But when something like this happens that we see was avoidable, it's very, very, very hard. And all I can say is I think that we should probably be going for more dialogue about this in a respectful manner than less. And then arguing or trying to justify it. There's no reason to justify it because law enforcement is not one thing that thinks alike. Law enforcement is an honor, it's a mantle, it's a line. And so you don't say, are you for the cops or you're not? No. We all have been mistreated. We've all had the bad apple. And now I think all of us can agree that some sort of procedure needs to happen when people get pulled over. So hopefully better minds than me will come up with some kind of a solution.